How do our decisions today, like, really ripple through time? Shaping a tomorrow we can barely even imagine.
It's a huge question.
Right. Yeah. What kind of approach, what kind of science even tries to get a handle on something so vast and interconnected and, frankly, uncertain?
Mm-hmm.
That's really the heart of our deep dive today, our mission to unpack this whole intricate world of human long-term consequences.
This sounds heavy, I know.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to try and make it clear, compelling for you, our listener, sort of a shortcut to getting really well informed on this.
Yeah, cutting through some of the complexity.
Exactly. We'll be exploring the source material you've provided, which gives us this unique lens, especially looking at it through the growing influence of artificial intelligence.
AI looms large here.
It really does. And this isn't just about, trying to predict the future with a crystal ball. It's more fundamental.
Mm.
It's about understanding the very nature of knowledge in this area, recognizing Earth and us, human societies, as these living, breathing, complex adaptive systems.
Right, constantly changing.
And exploring how AI is both this incredibly powerful tool and a source of, well, new challenges, new ethical knots to untangle.
A double-edged sword, for sure.
We'll see how all these different fields, science, social science, ethics, maybe even the arts, have to come together to even begin to grasp these long-term impacts, like mapping totally uncharted territory.
Yeah, everyone needs a piece of the compass, as you said.
So where do we start? What is this science of human long-term consequences, SHLTC?
Well, what's really insightful from the sources is that SHLTC isn't like a single scientific discipline, not in the usual sense.
Okay.
It's described as a meta-scientific endeavor.
Meta-scientific, science of the science. What does that actually mean here?
Yeah, basically. It's not about running new lab experiments or field work in the traditional way. It's more about critically examining how we gather knowledge about the future.
Oh, okay.
It's an inquiry into the nature of understanding itself in this field, especially given how much uncertainty there is, right? When you're talking decades, centuries.
Uncertainty, yeah.
It forces us to ask, how do we even know what we think we know about tomorrow? It's about the foundations of that knowledge.
Got it. So it's like quality control for how we think about the long term, not just churning out predictions.
Exactly, which leads directly to how it approaches knowledge itself. The source calls it epistemological pluralism.
Okay, that sounds academic. Epistemological pluralism.
It does, a bit. But the idea behind it is actually really practical.
How so?
Well, the source emphasizes that for something like SHLTC, you just can't rely only on, say, climate models or economic forecasts. Traditional scientific data isn't enough.
Right.
You need to integrate all sorts of knowledge. Indigenous wisdom, local expertise from people on the ground, even things like artistic representations. They all offer different insights.
So bringing different ways of knowing together, why is that blend so critical? And how does it help avoid these epistemological silos the source mentions?
It's absolutely crucial. Imagine researchers just stuck in their own little towers, right? Climate scientists here, economists there, sociologists over there.
Not talking to each other.
Exactly. Those are the silos. They miss the bigger picture because they're only using their own tools, their own perspective. Pluralism says, hey, no single discipline has the whole truth, especially with these huge, messy, long-term problems.
Okay, that makes sense. Break down the walls.
Pretty much. And this integrated approach is essential because Earth and human societies are, as you mentioned, prime examples of complex adaptive systems, CAS.
CAs. Okay, unpack that a bit. What makes them complex and adaptive?
Well, think about things like nonlinear dynamics. That's a key characteristic, meaning small changes, tiny inputs can sometimes have these huge, disproportionate, unpredictable effects down a line. The classic butterfly effect idea.
Right, flap of a wing in Brazil.
Sets off a tornado in Texas, yeah. It's maybe not that direct, but the principle holds. Things aren't always proportional or predictable in a straight line.
So if it's not about predicting perfectly,
then the goal shifts. It's less about pinpoint forecasts and more about understanding the dynamics of the system. How does it tend to behave? What kind of surprising emergent properties might pop up?
Okay.
And the focus becomes navigating a range of plausible futures, not betting on one specific outcome. It's about resilience and adaptation in the face of that inherent unpredictability.
So understanding the dance rather than predicting every single step.
You got it. Understanding the dance.
Okay, so if Earth and humanity are this complex adaptive system, this dance, what does it mean for us, practically? The source material brings up the planetary boundaries framework.
Right.
For you listening, these boundaries are basically the safe operating limits for humanity's impact on the planet's crucial systems. Like guardrails, maybe?
That's a good way to put it. Guardrails for the planet. And here's the kicker, the really striking reality the sources lay out.
Uh-oh.
There are 9 of these boundaries identified. And as of 2023, humanity has already crossed 6 of them.
6 out of 9. Wow.
Yeah. We've pushed beyond the safe zone for key Earth system processes.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Climate change is the big one everyone knows. The safe limit for CO2 in the atmosphere, about 350 parts per million. We're currently around 417 ppm.
Way over.
Way over.
Yeah.
Then there's biosphere integrity, basically, biodiversity loss. Species are going extinct at rates the source says are over 10 times the safe background rate. Not over millennia, but right now.
That's staggering.
It is. And then you have things like biogeochemical flows, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, vital for agriculture and life itself. We're pumping nitrogen into the environment at like 3 times the safe limit, and phosphorus over 20 times.
20 times. How is that sustainable?
Well, that's the point. It's not sustainable within the current framework. And crucially, these boundaries aren't separate issues, they're interconnected.
Right, dominoes.
Exactly. Crossing one makes it more likely you'll cross another. It creates these cascading risks, threatening the stability of the whole Earth system.
That interconnectedness really hits home with this idea of coupled human environment systems. We're not just living on the Earth, we're tangled up with it.
Deeply tangled. We affect the environment, obviously, but then the environment affects us right back.
Creating these feedback loops.
Complex feedback loops, yeah.
Right.
And nonlinear causality, it can be really hard to trace exactly why something happened, because the cause and effect aren't simple or immediate. It's that cosmic dance again.
So how do we even begin to understand that dance? The sources mention human ecology and some natural laws.
Right. Human ecology tries to apply ecological principles to understand how human societies interact with their environments. The sources mention a couple of fundamental ideas, like the law of interrelatedness. Basically, no man is an island, everything's connected, actions have consequences, ripple effects.
Okay, simple but profound.
And the law of conservation of energy. You know, energy and matter aren't created or destroyed, just transformed. It reminds us that everything we use, everything we discard, it doesn't just disappear. It goes somewhere, changes form.
Right. Know a way to throw things to.
Exactly. These aren't laws like physics, maybe, but principles that highlight the flows and connections within these coupled systems. Our actions always have reactions. Always.
And building on that understanding, we get to deep ecology, which sounds deep.
It is, in a way. It's an ecocentric worldview. It argues that all life, all ecosystems have intrinsic value, inherent worth, completely separate from whether they're useful to humans.
So not just valuing a forest for its timber, but for its own sake.
Precisely. And this isn't just philosophical navel-gazing. The sources show how it connects to practical applications.
Like what?
Things like biomimicry, learning from nature's designs. The source gives examples like wind turbine blades inspired by whale fins or super water repellent fabrics based on lotus leaves. Nature's already solved a lot of problems.
That's cool, using nature's R&D department.
Kind of. And things like natural systems agriculture, which tries to design farming systems that mimic self-sustaining natural ecosystems, reducing the need for external inputs like fertilizers and pesticides.
Moving towards working with nature, not against it.
Yeah, the source calls it a regenerative partnership with nature. We're not just takers. We can be participants in a healthy cycle.
And how does this connect back to us, to human flourishing?
Well, the source makes a really strong case that long-term human flourishing has to happen within these ecological limits. It leads to this idea of bounded prosperity.
Bounded prosperity, meaning thriving but within limits.
Exactly. Not infinite growth on a finite planet, but finding well-being within the planet's carrying capacity. And history gives us some pretty stark warnings here.
Oh, yeah.
The sources are compelling. They point to how climate impacts, especially drought, contributed to the collapse or decline of major civilizations.
Like which ones?
The Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Akkadian Empire, and Mesopotamia both hit hard by severe droughts around 4,200 years ago. The Indus Valley civilization saw de-urbanization linked to long-term drought. Same for the classic Maida collapse, and the abandonment of the city of Angkor in Cambodia drought was a major factor. Even closer to our time, the general crisis of the 17th century in Europe.
What happened then?
Widespread crop failures, famine, war, disease, all linked to the climate fluctuations of the Little Ice Age. It shows that ignoring ecological limits or being hit by shifts beyond your control has had devastating consequences throughout history. We're not the first to face this.
Those examples really drive home the long reach of these environmental factors. And that brings us squarely into the ethical dimension, right? Our responsibility across time.
Yeah.
The sources call it intergenerational equity.
Right. Our moral obligation to future generations. What kind of world are we leaving behind?
But it's not just about the future, is it? The sources add another layer.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's not just looking forward. It also involves looking back and addressing historical injustices suffered by past generations.
How does that work?
Things like systemic racism, the legacy of colonialism, cultural elimination. These aren't just historical events. Their effects linger, they shape the present, they create inequalities today.
So the injustices echo through time.
Exactly. The source calls it a multi-temporal justice framework. We have obligations forward and backward in a sense because the past is still present in many ways.
That creates a real tension, doesn't it? Between present needs and future. Well, future everything. Opportunities, well-being.
Absolutely. And the source material gives concrete examples of this conflict.
Like,
Think about the growing U.S. national debt. Who ultimately pays that back? Future generations. Or social safety nets in some developed countries. The spending often benefits older generations more, while younger generations face a tougher economic climate and the brunt of environmental damage.
yeah, the source had that stat about kids born in 2020 facing potentially 7 times more extreme weather events than their grandparents born in 1960.
Exactly. That's a massive shift in burden across generations. It's not equitable.
And this ties into economics, too, with this discount rate dilemma. How does that work?
Okay, so in economics, a discount rate is basically a way of calculating how much future benefits or costs are worth today.
Right, money tomorrow is worth less than money today.
Kind of, yeah. But if you apply a high discount rate to something like climate change mitigation, the future benefits like, a stable climate in 50 years seem tiny, almost worthless, as the source puts it, in today's calculations.
So it encourages short-term thinking.
Massively. It embeds a systemic bias against future generations right into our economic decision-making. It's a profound ethical challenge hiding in a seemingly technical calculation.
Wow.
And we see similar tensions playing out today with things like housing affordability, a huge issue for younger people, or the increasing burden of elder care falling on the working-age population. Present needs versus future implications.
Okay, so we have these vast systems, planetary boundaries, economic biases, intergenerational issues. But what about us? Our own minds? How does plain old human psychology fit into making these huge long-term decisions?
The human element. Yeah, the sources dive deep into our built-in cognitive limitations and biases. Our brains aren't always wired for optimal long-term thinking.
We take mental shortcuts.
We absolutely do. And the sources detail some key ones that really mess with long-term perspectives.
Give me some examples.
Okay, there's confirmation bias. We tend to seek out and believe information that just confirms what we already think, which makes it really hard to change our minds, even with new evidence, and it fuels disagreements.
We live in echo chambers.
Pretty much. Then there's anchoring bias. We latch onto the first piece of information we get and weigh it too heavily, making us resistant to updating our views.
Stubbornness, basically.
The
Yeah.
cognitive form of it, yeah. Then groupthink, you see this in organizations. Groups prioritize consensus and harmony over critical thinking and dissent, leading to bad decisions just to keep everyone happy.
Avoiding rocking the boat.
Right. There's also zero-sum bias, the assumption that if one side gains, the other must lose. This kills collaboration, especially on complex global problems where win-win solutions might exist.
And the classic in-group, out-group bias.
Yeah, that unconscious tendency to favor our own group and be suspicious of others. It fuels tribalism, nationalism, all sorts of divisions.
And these aren't just individual quirks, are they? They scale up.
That's the scary part. When these biases operate across millions of people, across societies, they can create these huge collective blind spots. We become incredibly resistant to seeing and acting on long-term threats, even when they're staring us in the face.
And linked to this, the source mentions moral disengagement. How does that work? It sounds like letting yourself off the hook.
That's a good way to put it. It's a set of cognitive tricks, basically, that allow people or groups to behave unethically or support unethical actions without feeling bad about it, without self-condemnation.
Mental gymnastics.
Totally. The source lists mechanisms like moral justification, reframing harmful actions as necessary for some greater good, or dehumanization, stripping victims of their human qualities, making it easier to harm them.
So ways we rationalize bad behavior.
Exactly. And again, think about how this plays out on a societal level. The sources connect this to historical patterns of cultural elimination and dominance.
How so?
Well, things like cultural homogenization, where dominant global cultures overwhelm or erase local ones, or hegemonic erasure, where the history and contributions of minority cultures are suppressed or ignored.
Making them invisible.
Right. And the sources specifically call out settler colonialism, not just as historical conquest, but as an ongoing logic of elimination. This isn't always overt violence. It can include things like forced assimilation, residential schools designed to stamp out indigenous cultures.
Destroying identity.
Yes. The victims suffer profound loss of identity, heritage, language, plus ongoing systemic inequality. And the implicit beneficiaries, often the dominant culture, sometimes corporations benefiting from access to resources.
That's heavy stuff. And what about just rule breaking?
Yeah.
And conflict between groups? What are the psychological roots there?
The sources point to a mix of things. Individual personality traits like impulsivity or low empathy can play a role. Peer influence is huge, especially for adolescents conforming to group norms, even bad ones.
Getting in.
Yeah. And broader cultural factors like perceiving authority as unjust, or deep-seated beliefs about your own group's superiority, or past grievances, or just profound distrust of the other side. These core beliefs are powerful drivers of conflict.
And does our evolutionary past play into this tendency towards us versus them?
The sources argue strongly that it does. Xenophobia, distrust of outsiders, tribalism, these seem to have deep roots.
How deep?
They discuss this idea of parochial altruism. Basically, the theory is that intense cooperation within groups evolved alongside hostility between groups, likely driven by the pressures of ancient warfare and competition for resources.
Cooperate to compete, essentially.
Right, and they draw comparisons with our primate relatives. Chimpanzees show extreme territoriality, lethal aggression between groups. Bonobos, interestingly, are generally more peaceful, using sex to diffuse tension. But the common thread, even across different primate species, is this acute awareness of who's in the group and who's an outsider. The source argues this primal in-group, out-group divide is bred into the primate line.
Wow. So it's really fundamental.
It seems to be. And while that instinct might have helped our ancestors survive in small, competing bands, it poses a massive challenge for global cooperation today. How do we overcome that deep-seated us versus them when we face shared global threats like climate change?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Okay, so we've got planetary limits, complex systems, tricky economics, human biases, evolutionary baggage. It's a lot. Can technology, specifically AI, help us navigate this maze? The source calls AI augmented cognition.
Right. AI as a potential foresight multiplier.
How does that work in practice? What can AI actually do?
Well, its power in prediction and modeling is already pretty significant, and it's growing fast. The sources give examples like AI forecasting national energy needs more accurately, or providing flood warnings up to 7 days in advance, huge for preparedness. Using AI to identify urban heat islands and target cooling interventions where they're needed most.
Practical stuff.
Yeah, and even in business, AI boosting productivity, accelerating revenue growth. But maybe more relevant here is AI simulating human behavior.
Simulating us. How?
Using large language models, LLMs, the tech behind things like ChatGPT. Researchers are using them in social science to run simulations, test assumptions about how people might react to policies, figure out optimal sample sizes for studies. It's like a low-cost virtual lab for human interaction.
That sounds incredibly powerful, almost too powerful. What are the catches? The source mentions a mimicry fidelity gap.
Right, that's a key limitation. While AI, these LLMs can mimic human responses pretty convincingly on the surface.
They sound human.
They do, but they struggle to capture the full variety and nuance of real human responses across diverse populations. And they often don't generalize well beyond the specific data they were trained on. They can be brittle.
So they're good actors, but maybe not fully understanding the role.
Something like that. It means we still absolutely need real human data, real human input for robust social understanding. AI should augment human research, the source argues, not replace it.
Okay, and this limitation points straight towards the NIST for ethical AI governance, right?
Absolutely critical. The sources talk about an algorithmic trust deficit. People are wary of AI, and often for good reason.
Why? What are the big ethical pitfalls?
Several key ones. First, bias. AI systems learn from data, and if that data reflects historical biases, racism, sexism, whatever the AI can inherit, and even amplify those biases.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Essentially. So you need diverse data sets, constant audits. Second, transparency. Many advanced AI models are black boxes. We don't fully understand how they reach their decisions.
Can't trust what you can't understand.
Exactly. We need explainable AI, clear documentation. Third, accountability. If an AI makes a mistake, a wrong medical diagnosis, a biased loan decision, who's responsible? The developer, the user. We need clear protocols. Very. And then there's the broader societal risk. The source calls it a potential digital panopticon.
Panopticon. Like the prison design.
Yeah, the idea of constant surveillance. AI being used for computational politics, manipulating public opinion, maybe even using subliminal techniques to influence behavior. That's a serious worry.
Are there rules against that?
People are trying. The European Commission's AI Act, for example, aims to prohibit AI systems that exploit vulnerabilities or use manipulative techniques. But it's an ongoing battle.
So it's not just the tech, it's how we build and use it. The source talks about distributed moral agency. What's that?
It means moral responsibility for AI doesn't lie with just one person or group. It's shared.
Shared how?
Across the whole life cycle. The developers who design it, the companies who deploy it, the individuals who use it, even the policymakers who regulate it. Everyone has a piece of the ethical puzzle.
Reminds me of that quote from the source.
Yeah.
It takes a species to raise an AI.
Exactly. AI systems ultimately reflect the values, the ethics, the biases that we collectively embed in them. They're a mirror to us in many ways.
Okay. So knowing all this, the complexity, the limits, the biases, the potential and peril of AI, how do we actually apply it? How do we move towards building a better future? Where do the sources point us?
Well, they suggest it starts with leadership and governance, specifically adaptive governance and what they call holistic steward leadership.
Holistic steward. What does that kind of leader look like?
They need a mix of qualities, definitely environmental literacy, understanding the basics of ecological systems, systems thinking, that ability to see the connections, the bigger picture,
Okay.
ethical leadership, obviously, a focus on innovation, being comfortable with data analysis, strong collaboration skills, and crucially, adaptability, being able to learn and pivot as conditions change.
Sounds like a tall order.
It is. And interestingly, these leaders often influence without direct formal authority. They build coalitions, they persuade, they connect dots for people.
And how do we get leaders like that? What kind of culture elects or supports them?
The source talks about needing a foresight-informed democratic mandate, meaning a public, a society that values and demands long-term thinking from its leaders, prioritizing future well-being, not just immediate gratification.
Like that Haudenosaunee Confederacy example, thinking 7 generations ahead.
Exactly, that kind of long-term perspective. It also means embracing systems thinking as a society, promoting inclusivity so diverse perspectives are heard, valuing critical thinking over knee-jerk reaction.
Resisting manipulation.
Yes, fostering transparency, encouraging collaboration, building a kind of collective intelligence that has a long view.
Okay, and within that society, how do we deal with harmful behavior? Rule breaking, crime. The source suggests shifting away from just punishment.
Yeah, this is a really interesting point. The data suggests purely punitive approaches often backfire. High rates of reoffending, for example. The source mentions reincarceration rates as high as 80% in some systems. Punishment doesn't always fix the problem and can even make it worse.
So what's the alternative?
The sources advocate for a restorative systemic justice imperative.
Restorative justice.
Yeah. The focus shifts from just assigning blame and punishment to repairing the harm caused, addressing the underlying root causes of the behavior, and healing the relationships within the community.
Getting to the why.
Exactly. And studies show restorative approaches can actually reduce reoffending significantly, maybe by 40%. It emphasizes what the source calls empathetic accountability, holding people responsible, but in a way that fosters understanding and reintegration, not just exclusion.
Rebuilding instead of just tearing down.
Right. It's about fixing the social fabric, not just locking people away.
And education must play a huge role in building that kind of society.
Absolutely central. The source calls for a curriculum of consequence.
I like that name. What's in it?
It's about embedding critical thinking, empathy, and ethical reasoning throughout education, helping young people understand complex systems, grapple with long-term consequences, understand different perspectives.
Preparing them to be future-ready citizens, as the source puts it.
Exactly. Equipping them with the mental tools to navigate the kinds of complex challenges we've been talking about.
Okay. And when we do need to communicate these big, scary, long-term risks, like climate change, how do we do it effectively? People tend to tune out distant threats.
Yeah, that's our temporal discounting of risk bias kicking in again. We prioritize the immediate threat over the looming one.
So how do we counter that?
The source suggests localized urgency.
Local.
Make it local, make it tangible, make it relatable now. Translate the abstract global threat parts per million of CO2 into concrete local impacts people can see and feel. Use storytelling, connect it to their lives, their communities, and crucially, offer clear, actionable steps they can take.
Give people agency, not just fear.
Right. Urgency, yes, but paired with efficacy. That seems to be key.
And finally, for policymakers, planners, how do they avoid falling into these cognitive traps themselves when making decisions about the future?
They need what the source calls reflexive foresight.
Reflexive, meaning?
Meaning being self-aware about their own potential biases, confirmation bias, groupthink, all of them, and actively building in processes to mitigate them.
Like what?
Like ensuring diverse viewpoints are included, actively seeking out dissenting opinions, using structured decision-making techniques that challenge assumptions, ensuring participatory approaches so marginalized groups aren't excluded or further disadvantaged by future plans.
So consciously designing the process of foresight to be smarter than our individual biases.
Exactly. It's about being intentional about how we think about the future, not just what we think.
Wow. Okay. So wrapping this up for you, our listener.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We certainly have.
We've journeyed through this incredibly intricate web of human long-term consequences, from the scale of planetary boundaries, the dynamics of complex systems,
to the nitty-gritty of our own cognitive biases, the echoes of history.
and the really profound dual nature of AI, its power and its peril. It's so clear that understanding this isn't just one field's job. It's this huge, ongoing, interdisciplinary exploration.
It really demands we look at ourselves and our world with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
But, despite all the challenges, the complexity, our own limitations, the power of AI, the sources don't just leave us overwhelmed. They point towards really clear, actionable imperatives.
Like what? Can you recap the big ones?
Sure. Embracing diverse knowledge, that epistemological pluralism, building robust ethical AI governance, cultivating that curriculum of consequence in education, shifting towards restorative systemic justice, championing adaptive governance and that holistic steward leadership, practicing reflexive foresight in planning.
Communicating with localized urgency.
Yes. And orienting our societies toward that idea of bounded prosperity, thriving within ecological limits. These aren't just abstract ideas. They feel like the navigational tools we need.
So a final thought to leave you with. If our flourishing as humans is truly deeply linked to the health of our planet,
And it seems undeniable that it is.
and if AI gives us these powerful new ways to understand that link, maybe even shape it, then the question becomes personal, doesn't it? What deliberate steps will you take in your life, your work, your community to contribute to a future where well-being isn't just about human thriving in isolation, but about a truly balanced universe?
A big question to ponder.
Definitely something to think about.
This is DigitView.